In October 2019, in the quiet town of Springville, Utah, a 16-year-old girl left home one cool afternoon to pick up medicine from the pharmacy. She vanished along a street less than half a mile from her front door. No scream, no struggle, no trace left behind. In a community where neighbors still knew each other's names, her absence became a mystery that haunted everyone. How could someone disappear completely in a place where safety felt as ordinary as Sunday mornings? If you think disappearances only happen in big cities, think again. This is the story of Madison Claire Foster, a girl who slipped through the cracks of a system built to protect, and the 3 years of silence that followed her last steps home. Some stories don't end the way you expect them to. Springville sat nestled against the Wasatch Mountains, a town of about 30,000 where autumn painted the hillsides gold and red. The air smelled of wood smoke and apples. Life moved with the patience of small places that rarely changed. Among its residents was a girl known to her neighbors as the Quiet One, the girl who always carried a notebook, the one who never forgot to say thank you. Madison Claire Foster was 16 years old, tall and slender, with long brown hair she kept in a single braid. Her eyes were hazel, shifting between green and brown depending on the light. She had been diagnosed with autism at age 7. Those who knew her described her as gentle, thoughtful, and deeply absorbed in her own world. She loved patterns, the way clouds formed in rows, the symmetry of leaves on branches. Her mother, Patricia Foster, worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic. Her stepfather, Ryan Mitchell, managed inventory at a sporting goods warehouse. Their home was small but tidy, a reflection of Madison's need for order. Her room told its own story. Books arranged by color on the shelves, drawings pinned to the wall in perfect rows, a collection of smooth river stones labeled with dates and locations she'd visited. Everything had its place, and everything meant something to her. October 19, 2019 began like any other Saturday in their household. The sun hung low and warm, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. Around 3 in the afternoon, Madison asked her mother for permission to walk to the pharmacy. She needed to pick up her medication, a routine errand. Patricia hesitated for a moment, knowing Madison rarely went anywhere alone. "You'll come straight back?" Patricia asked, her voice gentle but firm. Madison nodded, already pulling on her purple hoodie over her shoulders. "Straight back," she repeated carefully. Her voice was soft, deliberate, as if each word required thought before release. She grabbed her pink notebook and a $20 bill from the kitchen counter. Patricia watched from the doorway as her daughter walked down the driveway slowly. Her braid swung gently with each measured step. The street was empty, the afternoon air still and quiet around them. She expected Madison home within 30 minutes, maybe 40 at most. By 4 o'clock, Patricia began to worry, checking the clock repeatedly. By 5, she was calling Madison's phone every few minutes. No answer came, just the mechanical voice of voicemail each time. By 6, she was driving the route to the pharmacy frantically, scanning sidewalks, parking lots, bus stops, anywhere her daughter might be. The pharmacist remembered a girl matching Madison's description clearly. She had picked up her prescription and left around 3:30 that afternoon. No one saw where she went next after leaving the store. At 7:15, Patricia called the Springville Police Department to report her daughter missing. Her hands shook as she dialed the numbers. The dispatcher's questions were routine, practiced, meant to gather essential information quickly. Description, clothing, medical conditions, any history of running away from home. Patricia answered each one carefully, her voice breaking occasionally with emotion. "No, she's never run away before," she said firmly. "Yes, she has autism, but she's not dangerous to anyone." She doesn't know anyone outside this neighborhood, I promise you that. The officer who arrived shortly after was kind, but cautious in his approach. He explained that teenagers sometimes left home for a few hours unexpectedly, that they usually returned by nightfall without incident or explanation given. Patricia insisted this was different. Her daughter wasn't like other teenagers. She pointed to the calendar on the kitchen wall with trembling fingers. Madison had written every appointment in neat, careful handwriting there. She doesn't break routines, Patricia said quietly, her eyes filling with tears. Something's wrong. I know it. By morning, a search team began canvassing the area systematically and thoroughly. Officers followed the route to the pharmacy, marking the ground carefully. Yellow flags appeared where footprints were found in the dirt. The prints faded near a bus stop on Main Street, suddenly. Beside it lay a purple backpack, unmistakably Madison's property. Inside were her notebook, the prescription bottle, and one small, smooth stone. There were no signs of struggle, no torn clothing, no blood. No witnesses came forward with information. A tracking dog followed the scent along the bus line carefully. The trail continued for several blocks before losing it completely. Near the highway entrance, the dog circled twice, then sat down. Throughout the weekend, volunteers joined the search in growing numbers. Flyers went up in grocery stores, gas stations, community centers across town. Local news aired a segment describing a missing autistic teenager from Springville. Tips came in throughout the day and night from concerned citizens. A girl seen near Provo walking alone. Another sighting reported near Spanish Fork at a convenience store. Each tip was checked thoroughly by officers and volunteers alike. Each one led absolutely nowhere, dissolving into dead ends. By Monday evening, the command post was reduced significantly in size. A single folding table remained with cold coffee and scattered papers. In the following days, Patricia visited the police station every single morning. She sat quietly while officers reviewed maps and timelines on the walls. When one detective suggested Madison might have left voluntarily, Patricia shook her head. "She doesn't plan trips," Patricia said firmly, her voice steady despite exhaustion. "She plans her day, hour by hour, nothing more than that." The distinction meant little to investigators focused on statistics and patterns, but it stayed in the official report nonetheless. The case number SP-919 was entered into the statewide missing person database. Neighbors brought food, prayers, and theories to the foster home daily. Some whispered that she had been lured online by a stranger. Others believed she had gotten confused and wandered too far away. A bus driver claimed to have seen someone matching her description clearly, boarding a route to Provo that same afternoon, though he couldn't confirm. By the end of the week, the search radius widened dramatically, 30 miles in every direction from the last known location. Helicopters scanned the mountains with thermal imaging equipment throughout the nights. Divers checked reservoirs and lakes, searching murky depths for any sign. Still nothing turned up. Not a single piece of evidence. On the 10th day, a detective found grainy footage from a camera. It showed a girl matching Madison's height walking east on Highway 89. The timestamp read 4:20 p.m., less than an hour after leaving. The next camera, 2 miles away, didn't capture her at all. Investigators debated whether it was her at all in the footage. The image was blurred, distorted by glare and distance between lenses. Without confirmation, the lead faded into the growing stack of maybes. If you've ever waited for someone who never came home, you know that silence becomes its own kind of torture. Weeks passed slowly, each day heavier than the one before it. The flyers began to yellow at the edges, curling in the wind. The story slipped from the front page to the community board. Patricia continued calling shelters, hospitals, police stations across Utah County daily. She held up Madison's photo and asked the same question repeatedly. "Have you seen this girl? Please, have you seen her?" Most people said no, shaking their heads with genuine sympathy in their eyes. Some thought they might have, but couldn't remember where or when. Autumn turned to winter as the calendar pages fell away silently. Snow blanketed the mountains in thick white layers that stayed for months. Springville's small community returned to its routines, though unease lingered everywhere. In towns like this, where everyone knows everyone else's business intimately, absence becomes weight. The Foster T. House kept its porch light burning every single night. Ryan left it on even when the electric bill climbed higher. "She'll need to see it when she comes home," Patricia said quietly. By December, the official search was scaled back significantly due to resources. The case file grew thin, containing only basic information now. Interviews logged, maps marked with red circles, evidence sealed in plastic. The last entry that year read simply in black ink official language. "Subject not located. Investigation ongoing." It was the language of bureaucracy, cold and final. It sounded like closure, but it wasn't. Not really. Not for them. Springville went quiet again as winter deepened around the mountains. The school year resumed after the holiday break with Madison's desk empty. The pharmacy installed new security cameras with better resolution and wider angles. The purple backpack was returned to Patricia with a receipt for evidence. She placed it on Madison's bed carefully and didn't move it again. Months later, when spring arrived and wildflowers bloomed along Highway 89, help came. A social worker delivered a letter to their door one afternoon. Inside was a notice from a missing person foundation, a reminder, asking them to update Madison's profile every 6 months with new information. Patricia sat at the kitchen table reading the same words carefully. 16 years old. 5'8". Brown hair, hazel eyes, last seen wearing a purple hoodie with white drawstrings and dark jeans. She folded the paper slowly, placed it beside Madison's pink notebook, and whispered to no one in particular, her voice barely audible. "She's still out there somewhere. I know she is." And from that evening on, Springville returned to its steady silence. The kind that comes after sirens fade into memory and distance, after searchlights are packed away into storage until needed again, after people stop asking questions aloud at the grocery store. Behind one small window, a light continued to burn steadily through night, marking a house that still waited patiently for a girl who vanished. Between the ordinary and the unknown, between safety and mystery, unsolved. No one in Springville knew it then, but the trail had not ended. The trail that seemed to stop at the bus stop was beginning. Stretching 30 miles north toward a city where strangers passed daily, where a girl with a notebook could disappear into plain sight. For 3 long years, without anyone noticing who she really was. The morning after the report was filed, Springville woke to sirens. Patrol cars rolled through quiet streets slowly, methodically checking every corner. Volunteers gathered at the community center before dawn, organizing into search teams. The small police department, unaccustomed to cases like this one, tried organizing. They had procedures, of course, forms and grids and checklists, but not the experience of time slipping away while a family waited. Detective James Caldwell, steady man in his 40s, was assigned lead. He had 15 years on the force, had seen runaways and custody disputes, even abduction attempts that ended in arrests and courtrooms and justice. But this one, he said later to a colleague over coffee. It was like chasing smoke through a forest fire. The first step was routine. Trace the last known movements carefully. They confirmed Madison had picked up her prescription at 3:30 exactly. Security footage showed her leaving the pharmacy alone, notebook tucked under arm. Then the footage cut to static, and the feed reset automatically. No other cameras captured her route through town or beyond it. Officers canvassed the neighborhood again, knocking on every door they could. Doorbells were rung, yards checked, garages opened with homeowner permission granted. Someone thought they heard footsteps near the old railroad tracks that evening, but the statement was vague, uncertain, based on memory already fading. Another claimed to have seen a girl near a convenience store. The following morning, walking past the windows carrying something purple-colored. Caldwell followed every tip personally, drawing red lines on a large map. The county map was tacked to the precinct wall with pushpins. Within 2 days, the lines multiplied into a tangled web rapidly, reaching out from Springville like veins spreading through living skin tissue. Patricia came to the command post every morning without fail, bringing coffee for the search team in a cardboard carrier. She sat on a metal folding chair, hands wrapped around a cup, staring at the map as if willing it to speak truth. "We'll find her," someone would say, trying to offer comfort and hope. She always nodded, though her eyes betrayed her growing fear inside. Hope required discipline. She had learned that much already in life. It meant showing up even when logic began to fail you. By midweek, the county sheriff brought in a tracking dog specially trained. The dog picked up a trail near the bus stop quickly enough. Faint, uncertain, leading north toward the highway entrance and beyond it. Then the dog stopped abruptly near a gravel shoulder suddenly, confused, where trucks kicked up dust and scattered scents in every direction. Caldwell ordered the area swept thoroughly by hand and metal detector. They found discarded wrappers, broken glass, cigarette butts from travelers passing through. One torn page from a notebook, but it wasn't hers. News of the disappearance reached neighboring towns within 24 hours rapidly. Reporters arrived, interviewing neighbors outside their homes with cameras rolling constantly. Some spoke of Madison's quiet nature, her gentle way with animals. Others of her love for patterns and schedules that never varied. One elderly man said she once helped him find his cat. Without being asked, she just noticed it was missing, he said. The story aired that evening on 3 local stations simultaneously, framed by somber music and a tip line number displayed prominently. By morning, 3 new calls came in from concerned viewers, all from people claiming to have seen a similar girl near Provo. Officers drove there immediately, interviewing witnesses and checking security footage everywhere. Each lead collapsed within hours, turning to dust like the others. On the 4th day, the search widened to include hiking trails nearby, mountain roads that wound through forests and valleys for miles around. Volunteers combed the brush with poles, calling her name at intervals. The sound of it, Madison, Madison, echoed through the valleys repeatedly, and returned empty, swallowed by wind and distance and silence. Drones were deployed for aerial scanning with high-resolution cameras attached securely. Nothing significant appeared in the footage reviewed frame by frame. On the 5th day, divers checked local reservoirs with sonar equipment. They found only cold silt and forgotten debris at the bottom. Meanwhile, detectives checked hospitals, clinics, shelters across Utah County systematically and thoroughly. Madison's photo, a school picture with a shy half-smile, hung everywhere, on bulletin boards and computer screens in every precinct and office. Caldwell also contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children officially to register the case formally in their national database system. That meant her profile would enter a system viewable by agencies across the entire country, in every state, by every officer. It was a lifeline, but also an acknowledgement of something harder, that the search might last longer than anyone wished or hoped. Within 2 weeks, the case grew quieter as resources dwindled slowly. Officers were reassigned to other duties, other cases demanding attention now. The task force reduced to a skeleton crew working part-time hours. Caldwell kept one deputy on it, reviewing files and following leads. The official file contained reports, maps, and a single photo now, of Patricia taken the day she gave her statement at headquarters. Her expression was steady, composed, but hollowed by exhaustion showing through. She had stopped wearing makeup, stopped answering casual questions from concerned friends. The porch light stayed on every single night, without exception or pause. Then came the first theory from an unexpected source that shifted everything. A classmate told police that Madison had once mentioned wanting to visit Temple Square in Salt Lake City, a place she'd read about. That small remark shifted attention northward immediately toward the capital city. Maybe she had taken a bus there. Maybe she was trying to reach a destination she'd seen in pictures or read about. Detectives checked ticket records at the bus station thoroughly and carefully. No purchases under her name appeared in the system at all. Still, Caldwell couldn't shake the image from his mind stubbornly, of Madison walking alone along a highway lined with mountains and sky, guided by a destination no one else could see or understand fully. Autumn gave way to winter as the weeks turned into months. Rain turned to snow that blanketed the mountains in thick white layers, and with it came a stillness that made people avoid eye contact when they passed the foster house on their way to work or school. In small towns like Springville, grief becomes part of the landscape itself. It settles quietly like frost on windows, visible but untouchable by hands. The police file, now labeled active pending leads, sat in a cabinet. Among others less haunting, less urgent, slowly gathering dust over time. When the holidays arrived that year, Patricia received a single card carefully. From a church group she barely knew, offering prayers and support. Still thinking of her, the card read in neat handwriting inside. She placed it beside Madison's photo on the mantel without saying anything. In January, a body was found near a frozen creek miles away. For 2 days, everyone in town held their breath, waiting for news. Caldwell called Patricia before the media could spread the word everywhere. "We don't know yet," he said gently, his voice steady and calm. The relief was immediate when dental records ruled it out completely. But even relief carried its own pain, its own weight to bear. The uncertainty remained intact, hanging over everything like a storm cloud. By early spring, the case began to cool officially in the records. The last note in the log read in simple black ink: "Possible voluntary departure. No evidence of foul play discovered during investigation." That was the bureaucratic language of defeat, of giving up without saying. It didn't mean they believed she had run away from home. Only that they had nothing left to disprove that theory anymore. Patricia kept visiting the station regularly, refusing to let them forget entirely. Sometimes she brought cookies for the officers working late-night shifts. Sometimes she brought only silence, sitting in the waiting area quietly. Caldwell would meet her in the hallway and promise sincerely, "If anything comes up, anything at all, I'll call you first." She always thanked him, knowing he meant every word he said. But he knew how cases like this went, how they faded. Not with answers, but with time slowly erasing memory and hope. In May 2020, Patricia and Ryan packed up their house carefully. The rent was rising, the memories too heavy to carry anymore. They moved to Orem, closer to Patricia's sister, who offered support. Before leaving, Patricia walked to Madison's room one last time alone. She stood in the doorway, looking at the books arranged by color, the drawings pinned in perfect rows on the walls still hanging there, the river stones labeled with dates and places they'd visited together once. She whispered something into the empty room that no one else heard. The Fosters' forwarding address was added to the official case file immediately. From that point forward, all updates from the missing persons network went to their new address in Orem, a different town, a different life. The Springville police eventually moved the folder to the inactive cabinet officially, coded as unsolved, pending new evidence or leads that might emerge. Caldwell retired the following year after 20 years of dedicated service. When asked later which case stayed with him most, haunted him. He mentioned only one name without hesitation: the girl with the notebook. Some cases end in discovery, some in courtrooms with justice served. This one dissolved into the slow forgetting of days passing unremarkably, but far beyond Springville, in places where no one knew her name. A young woman walked highways with a notebook and a shopping cart, unnoticed, unclaimed, and still alive, though no one yet understood that. In the months following the move to Orem, Patricia learned to measure time differently than she had before, not by seasons or holidays, but by phone calls that did not come, by silence that stretched. She would wake early, check her messages on her phone carefully, and stare at the silent list of missed calls that were never. Ryan left for work before dawn, managing inventory at a new warehouse. They spoke little over breakfast. Words had grown heavy between them. Every so often, Patricia would mention something small that caught her attention. How she'd seen a girl in a purple hoodie crossing the street, or how the evening light reminded her of Springville's quiet afternoons. And Ryan would nod without speaking, understanding without needing words spoken. Both of them understood that memory could be both comfort and wound. The missing person report remained active through the National Center system. Every few months, Patricia received an email asking her to confirm details or upload an age progression photo of what Madison might look. She always did, staring at the screen for long minutes afterward. The images changed slowly, reshaped by algorithms to guess what her daughter might look like now, the cheekbones sharper, the jaw a little longer. Each new version felt both familiar and foreign at the same time. Around the same time, the world began closing in under pandemic weight. Borders tightened, travel halted, and for the first time, she stopped searching. Shelters restricted visitors, hospitals demanded appointments, and the air itself carried danger. Patricia spent those months writing letters to organizations that rarely replied back, each one starting the same way in the same careful handwriting. "My daughter has been missing since October 2019, she would write. She sent them to counties across Utah, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, everywhere. Any place near a bus route or a major highway that might. Some letters came back stamped undeliverable in red ink across the front. Others vanished entirely, swallowed by the system without a trace left. For law enforcement, the case was classified as cold officially. Now, in practice, that meant no active investigation unless new evidence surfaced. Files were stored digitally now, scanned and backed up on servers. The paper maps and notes had been boxed and archived away. A detective in Utah County reviewed them once a year only. Signing the same line, no new leads discovered or reported this year. On the record, Madison Foster was still missing, still out there. Off the record, most officers had stopped expecting an update to come. Patricia joined several online forums for families of the missing children. The posts followed a rhythm of hope and fatigue she recognized immediately. Anniversaries, birthdays, prayers, photographs of faces grown older through imagination only. There were hundreds like hers, children lost to highways and circumstances, runaways who never came back, adults with mental illnesses who had vanished into the gaps of the world where no one looked closely. It was a strange fellowship, united by absence and endless waiting. Late at night, she would scroll through pages of recovered persons carefully, reading stories of those found in distant states, alive but changed. Their memories fragmented, their stories incomplete but hopeful despite everything that happened. Each story fed a quiet conviction growing inside her steadily over time. That maybe, just maybe, Madison was out there too, surviving somehow. In her own way, guided by patterns only she could see. In 2021, one possible lead emerged from an unexpected phone call. A man in Nevada called a tip line, claiming he had given food to a young drifter matching Madison's description near a shelter there. He said the girl had been pushing a shopping cart slowly, filled with blankets and empty cans near downtown Reno late at night. The lead was investigated thoroughly by local authorities who checked everything. No one matching the name or description was found anywhere in the area. Still, the image stayed with Patricia, haunting her dreams at night. Her daughter, taller now, wandering highways alone, tracing her own invisible map. The following year brought a similar call from Utah County, unexpected. Then another from Colorado a few weeks later from a concerned citizen. Each report blurred into the next, creating a pattern she couldn't ignore. Authorities warned her that many homeless youth fit the same basic profile: thin, fair-haired, quiet, moving from place to place without identification or help. It could be her, Patricia would say firmly, refusing to give up. And they would agree politely, promising to check, to investigate thoroughly always. Weeks later, the calls would end with the same message delivered. Negative identification, no match found in the system or on the streets. Through it all, the Mitchells continued to live as best they could. Patricia took work at a small health clinic as a receptionist again. Ryan built warehouse inventory systems until his hands were permanently stained with dust. The house was smaller than the one in Springville, more affordable. But she kept a spare room for Madison, untouched since they moved. On the dresser lay the pink notebook open to a half-finished page, of numbers and patterns that Patricia never could decipher fully or understand. Temperatures, perhaps, or times, or something only Madison's mind could process. But she believed they were important to her daughter, meaningful somehow. Sometimes she would trace them with her finger gently, as if contact could restore the connection time had frayed between them, slowly but surely. On the 3rd anniversary of her disappearance, October 2022, Patricia lit a candle. By the window that faced the street, watching the flame flicker. She wrote in her journal that night, words meant only for herself. She would be 19 now. I hope someone is kind to her. Her words were private, not meant for any audience or eyes, yet they carried the same quiet rhythm as a prayer offered. During those years, outside her awareness completely, a young woman matching Madison's age, and appearance had begun to draw attention hundreds of miles north. She drifted through small towns in Utah County, Provo, Orem, Pleasant Grove, pushing a cart filled with bags and plastic bottles she'd collected carefully. Residents described her as polite, though distant, never meeting eyes directly. She avoided shelters, slept near gas stations, and accepted food offered. But rarely conversation, rarely speaking more than a few words at once. Some thought she might be local, from one of the nearby towns. Others assumed she was just passing through on her way elsewhere. Deputies occasionally checked on her, offering blankets or rides into town safely. She never gave a name when asked, just shook her head silently. One winter evening, a sheriff's patrol in Utah County stopped near a parking, where the young woman was standing in the snow, shivering badly. When asked if she needed help, she shook her head slowly. "I'm fine," she said quietly, her voice barely above the wind, and walked away into the darkness without looking back at them. The deputies noted the encounter in their daily report briefly and moved on. They had no reason to detain her. She had broken no law. The report was brief, matter-of-fact, routine for such encounters regularly. Female, approximately 20 years old, transient, declined assistance offered by officers. They had no idea they had just spoken to someone listed as missing more than 2 years earlier in their own county system. Patricia, meanwhile, had begun volunteering at a support group for parents regularly, of children with autism, meeting others who understood the daily wait. There she met others who understood the discipline of worry completely, the habit of checking weather reports in cities where their children might be. "When it rains," one mother said during a meeting one evening, "I can't help thinking if my son has somewhere dry to sleep." Patricia nodded, recognizing the thought immediately as her own recurring nightmare. By late 2022, her optimism had become a quieter thing inside her. Not gone, but reshaped by time and disappointment accumulated over years. She no longer expected sudden phone calls or miracles to appear from nowhere, but she still looked at every unfamiliar young face with a flicker of hope that refused to die completely, no matter how much time. The human mind, she had learned through this experience, can rehearse grief endlessly without resolution, but never fully accept disappearance as final truth. People need an ending, even a hard one, even one that brings pain. Without it, they keep rehearsing possibilities that never come to pass. Then, in early 2023, a relative sent her a news article from Utah County that caught her attention immediately when she read it. It mentioned a sheriff's office working with local volunteers to identify a young homeless woman who seemed cognitively different from others on streets. The article included no photo, only a brief description that made Patricia's heart race faster than it had in months of waiting. Tall, fair-haired, quiet, around 20 years old, seen near Provo regularly. Patricia paused, her pulse quickening in her chest as she reread. She forwarded the story to the investigator in Utah County immediately, who promised to follow up on the lead as soon as possible. Nothing came of it at the time, no confirmation or connection made. Still, the description stayed with her long after she closed the laptop. If you've been part of our community, you know that hope never really dies. It just waits for the right moment to speak again loudly. 3 months later, as winter began to break over the valley, something changed. Deputies in that same Utah County would receive another call about her, a young woman sleeping outside a gas station, shivering in the cold. By then, it had been nearly 3.5 years since Springville had last seen Madison Claire Foster walk down their streets. The Mitchells had learned to live with silence, but silence was ending. The winter of 2023 lingered longer than expected across Utah's valleys. Snow still lay in uneven folds on the shoulders of highways, and the air carried that kind of thin cold that settled deep. In Utah County, the season left the towns half empty and quiet. Ski resorts had closed early, and the main streets were silent. Except for the wind pushing through the bare trees at night, deputies from the sheriff's office were used to checking on stranded travelers and seasonal workers who had run out of rent money suddenly. So when reports came in about a young woman pushing a cart, through the snow, they added her description to the daily patrol notes. Female, early 20s, thin build, brown hair, seen near Provo and Orem, possibly transient, non-violent, declining assistance when offered by officers or residents. The first mention appeared in the incident log on February 10th, clearly. A resident called to say a girl had been sleeping behind grocery dumpsters. Deputies drove out, found her sitting near a propane tank enclosure alone. Her cart beside her, layered in mismatched coats and blankets she'd gathered. When asked her name, she didn't answer, just looked away quietly. She accepted a blanket, nodded once, and pointed toward the woods nearby. They recorded the interaction as a welfare check and moved on quickly. The next week, another call came in from a gas station manager. In Orem, same description, same cart filled with collected bottles and cans. She had been seen quietly stacking discarded items into plastic bags carefully, humming to herself softly, a tune no one recognized or could place. There was nothing criminal about her presence on the property at all. Utah's law required no identification unless an individual was being cited or detained for a specific violation of law or public safety concern. The deputies offered help, rides, shelter options available in the county. Each time she refused gently, shaking her head without making eye contact. She wasn't aggressive, only distant, as though human speech required translation, that she couldn't perform quickly or easily in the moment with strangers. Some nights she slept behind the dumpsters in the cold darkness. Other nights, locals saw the glow of a small fire near trees. A few began leaving food where she passed regularly on her route. They called her the quiet drifter among themselves when they talked. By March, her routine had become familiar enough that people stopped calling. Unless the temperature dropped dangerously low during the night hours when frost settled. It wasn't until early April that one resident driving to work noticed her curled up on concrete near a gas station called Jeremy's Store. The air temperature that morning hovered around freezing, dangerously cold for exposure. The resident hesitated, then called 911, not to report a crime exactly, but to check on her safety and well-being in the cold. Deputies arrived around 7:15 in the morning as the sun rose slowly. The woman was awake but shivering badly, clutching the handle of her cart, as though it anchored her to the world, kept her grounded somehow. They invited her into the patrol vehicle to warm up gradually. She accepted silently, climbing in, staring through the windshield at the snow. Covered hills across the road that gleamed white in morning light. The heater hummed loudly, filling the space with warmth and safety. One deputy offered her a cup of coffee from his thermos carefully. The woman held it with both hands, murmured something they couldn't catch. Inside the vehicle, the deputies began their standard welfare protocol by rote. They asked her name gently, trying to make eye contact. No answer came. Her eyes moved to the dashboard, then back outside. They tried again slowly, speaking in calm voices meant to reassure. "Can you tell us who you are? Where you're from originally?" Still nothing came, just silence that felt heavy and deliberate somehow. The silence wasn't defiance. They could tell that much from her posture. It had the texture of confusion, as if the questions themselves arrived, in a language that didn't belong to her, that she couldn't process. Lieutenant Sarah Thompson, who oversaw community patrols, joined the scene shortly after. She recognized the young woman from previous contacts noted in the logs, and noted how consistently she declined help offered by officers and citizens. "She communicates differently," Thompson later explained to her supervisor during a briefing. It was clear she was not a threat, but also not oriented. That phrase, "communicates differently," was added to the report along with a note, an internal tag for autism awareness that the department had recently implemented. At the same time, a dispatcher at the Utah County Sheriff's Office began checking databases for possible matches, a woman named Jennifer Martinez who was thorough. Welfare checks like this rarely yielded missing person identifications in her experience. Most transients were already known to local services, logged in systems. But Martinez had been reading about national coordination efforts through NCMEC recently, which included cases of minors who had aged into adulthood but remained listed. She pulled up the system, filtered for females between 16 and 21. Caucasian, from Utah and neighboring states, reported missing in recent years. The results filled several pages on her screen, each one a story. She scrolled through photo after photo, faces frozen in their last years, each with its own story of disappearance and family waiting somewhere. It was slow work, repetitive, and often fruitless, yielding nothing substantial usually. But around the 15th page, she stopped suddenly, her breath catching slightly. The image staring back at her was of a girl from Utah. Brown hair, purple hoodie, small birthmark visible on the left wrist clearly. The name beneath it read, Madison Claire Foster, reported missing from Springville. October 2019, age at disappearance 16 years old, exactly at that time. Martinez printed the file quickly and carried it to Thompson's desk. "Could this be her?" she asked, her voice uncertain but hopeful. Thompson compared the features carefully, studying both images side by side closely. Same jawline, same set of the mouth, though older, thinner from years. She walked back to the patrol car, careful not to startle anyone. "Hey," Thompson said gently, kneeling beside the open door carefully and slowly. "We're trying to help you get home. Do you have family in Springville?" The woman blinked, but didn't respond, her gaze unfocused and distant still. Thompson noticed the faint shadow of a mark on her wrist then. The same spot noted in the report from years ago precisely. She stepped aside and made the call listed. On the NCMEC entry, the contact number for the reporting guardian, Patricia Foster, still listed as active. When Patricia answered, her voice carried the brittle caution of someone careful, who had learned not to expect good news from unknown numbers anymore. Thompson introduced herself and explained that they had encountered someone who might be her daughter, found in Provo, matching the description in the missing person report. There was a long pause, then a question barely above a whisper. "Does she have a birthmark on her left wrist?" Patricia asked carefully. Thompson looked again at the young woman's wrist visible in the light. "Yes," she said softly, feeling the weight of the moment fully. "She does, right here on the left side." Patricia's breath caught on the line audibly, breaking into a sob immediately. She asked for a photo, her voice shaking with emotion barely controlled. Within minutes, Thompson sent one taken discreetly from the patrol camera. The reply came almost instantly, faster than Thompson expected to receive it. "That's her. That's my Madison. Please don't let her go anywhere." The confirmation set a quiet chain of events into motion immediately. Thompson notified the department, and arrangements began for the family to travel. From Orem to Provo, less than an hour away, but feeling like. In the meantime, the young woman was taken to a local center for evaluation and warmth, given food and a safe place to rest. She ate little, slept deeply for hours, and spoke only when necessary. Deputies stayed nearby, aware that this was not an arrest at all, not an interrogation, but a reunion waiting to happen when the time came. News spread quickly within the department among officers working that day. Officers who had passed her on the street felt an ache of disbelief. For months they had seen her, helped her, and never known her name. One deputy said later during an interview with local media afterward, "She wasn't hiding from us. She just wasn't found until now." 2 hours later, Patricia and Ryan arrived in Provo, driving faster than safe. They met with deputies in a small office before being shown photographs. For final verification before the reunion could take place officially and properly. Ryan stared at the image for several seconds, his hands trembling visibly. "A little older," he murmured quietly, his voice thick with emotion barely held. "But yeah, that's her. That's Madison for sure." On speakerphone, Patricia's voice broke into sobs she couldn't control anymore. "My baby's alive," she said through tears, her words barely understandable through emotion. "Please, can you take me to her right now?" That evening, as snow began to fall again over Provo lightly, a reunion unfolded. Not in front of cameras or crowds gathered to witness the moment, but in a quiet corridor of the county building, away from eyes. The young woman looked up as two familiar figures entered the room. There was a pause, recognition, moving slowly across her face like dawn, as though traveling through years of fog to reach the present moment. Then her mother's voice on the phone again, trembling but clear and strong. "Madison, Maddie, it's Mom." She nodded once, slowly, as if testing the weight of the name. For 3 years, her name had lived only on missing posters scattered, and digital lists that no one checked regularly anymore at all. Now in that small mountain county, surrounded by people who had unknowingly crossed paths with her for months without recognizing who she truly was inside. It returned to her like a key turning in a lock. The silence that had followed the family across towns and years finally broke, not with words exactly, but with the sound of someone breathing. Her name out loud for the first time in years, saying it clearly. The day after the reunion, a quiet settled over the department like snow. The usual hum of dispatch radios felt subdued, as though the building understood. That something rare had happened, one of those improbable resolutions officers hoped for. Madison remained under observation at the care center, sleeping more than speaking, adjusting to warmth and safety as if both were foreign climates. Her stepfather, Ryan, sat beside her during the first hours carefully. Unsure what to say, what words could bridge 3 years of absence. "We've been looking for you," he finally murmured softly, his voice breaking. Madison nodded slightly, but didn't answer, her eyes drifting towards the window. The doctor on call explained that long-term homelessness and exposure often left people disoriented, even those without developmental differences to complicate things further. In her case, with autism and years of survival on streets alone. It might take time before she could organize her memories into words. Patricia, listening over the phone to every update from the center carefully, repeated a phrase she hadn't spoken in years, her voice steady now. "Tell her I'm coming. Tell her Mom's on the way." The official verification came later that afternoon, through multiple checks and confirmations. Fingerprints taken during intake matched records from her juvenile medical file exactly. A secondary confirmation arrived through a scar on her left knee visible. An old bicycle accident noted in earlier reports from when she was. The match was irrefutable, confirmed by 3 independent sources checking databases and records. After 3 years, 4 months, and 17 days of searching and waiting. The case file, once labeled Unsolved Missing Juvenile, was reclassified officially today. As located alive, case closed with positive outcome and family reunited. It was a line of text on a screen in black letters. But to those who had read her name for years in reports, it felt like a small miracle hidden in bureaucratic language and forms. Still, the question lingered in everyone's mind, haunting the hallways and offices. Where had she been all this time? What had she seen? Investigators traced what little they could from scattered reports and minor contacts. Records showed that in 2020, a Jane Doe matching her description exactly had been cited for trespassing in Nevada, but released without any charges. She'd refused to provide identification and had given an alias that led nowhere, disappearing into the system's cracks where many fell through unnoticed. A similar record appeared months later in Colorado, again dismissed as routine. In both cases, officers had treated her as a harmless transient passing through. No one connected her to the girl missing from Utah County at all. The databases had never linked that far across state lines or systems. It became clear that Madison had spent much of those missing years drifting. Across western states, Nevada, Colorado, back to Utah, living quietly on edges. Pushing her shopping cart like a traveling shelter through towns and highways. Witnesses remembered her collecting recyclables, sometimes muttering numbers under her breath softly, sometimes standing still for long minutes as if calculating patterns in air. There was no evidence of criminal activity, no signs of substance abuse found. Just endurance, a life lived on the outer edges of attention and society. Patricia's arrival in Provo 2 days later marked the real beginning truly. Deputies met her at the station, then escorted her to the facility. She walked slowly down the hallway, clutching the strap of her purse tightly, as though holding on to balance itself, to reality shifting beneath her. When she saw Madison sitting by the window, hair longer, face leaner somehow, still holding that pink notebook even after years of carrying it everywhere. Her voice failed completely. No words came out at all from her throat. She knelt beside her daughter, touching her arm carefully, as if afraid. She might disappear again into thin air or wake from a dream. "Hi, sweetheart," Patricia whispered, her voice breaking on every syllable spoken softly. Madison's gaze flickered toward her, uncertain at first, then steadier with recognition. Recognition came not as a rush, but as a quiet realignment happening. The slow turning of something long frozen toward the light and warmth. For the officers watching from the doorway, it was one of those moments that transcended their usual work, beyond procedures and protocols and paperwork required. No arrests, no statements, no procedural close needed here at all. Just the sight of a mother reclaiming a child she had never stopped, searching for, never given up on, never let the system forget completely. Later, Thompson would describe it simply to reporters asking for details afterward. There were no words needed, only breathing together in the same space. Afterward, social workers began coordinating long-term support for Madison's recovery and reintegration. The county arranged for medical evaluations, mental health counseling sessions regularly, scheduled, and contact with autism specialists who understood her specific needs and challenges. Madison spoke little during interviews, but confirmed fragments of her journey slowly. She mentioned leaving Springville because of noise and too many people crowding. Walking for days, catching rides with strangers who never asked questions she couldn't. When asked how she survived those years alone on the streets, she shrugged once and said quietly, "People throw away enough food and things." Her pink notebook, weathered and stained by years of weather and use, contained lists of towns, bus numbers, and what appeared to be temperatures, and dates, an improvised calendar of survival written in her careful handwriting. Psychologists noted that individuals with autism sometimes retreat into structured wandering and routines, finding security in repetition and routine, even when detached from conventional living. For Madison, the cart, the counting, and the solitary paths through towns may have been her form of control in a world that felt unpredictable and overwhelming to her senses and mind, constantly processing everything. Patricia listened to these explanations with the patience of someone who understood. No longer needed reasons or explanations. Only presence mattered now to her. "She's here," she kept saying to everyone who asked how she felt. "That's enough for me. She's here and she's safe now." The story soon reached local media, then spread to national outlets quickly. Reporters from Salt Lake City, then from across the country, began calling. They wanted details, interviews, The full story of how and why. How she had been found, how long homeless, why no one recognized her. Thompson gave a single statement to the press gathered outside the station. This was not about law enforcement success or procedures followed correctly. It was about persistence, empathy, and luck coming together finally after years. She declined further interviews, protecting the family's privacy as requested by them. Yet the case stirred a broader conversation about the system's meant. To find missing people, about gaps that exist between agencies and states, experts pointed out that once a minor turns 18, their case loses priority in many jurisdictions, falling through cracks in the system designed differently. Adult privacy laws prevent forced identification unless a crime occurs or danger. Many families of autistic or mentally ill young adults fall into this gap. Unable to compel help legally, unable to stop searching emotionally or physically. Madison's story became a symbol of that quiet failure repeated across the nation. Our community understands that every missing person deserves to be found and brought home safely, no matter how long it takes or how far they've drifted. Back in Orem, their small home slowly adjusted to a new rhythm carefully. Madison stayed temporarily in Provo for care, but Patricia visited weekly without fail. She brought her familiar things from home, her favorite cereal, the blue blanket, from her old bed, and a small radio tuned to the station. Each visit was a conversation without many words spoken aloud between them. Patricia reading aloud, Madison nodding, the room filled with the soft hum again, of continuity rebuilding itself slowly but surely over time, and patience shown. Ryan, less expressive but no less moved, spoke to a reporter once. "You think you'd prepare yourself for any outcome," he said quietly, looking away. "You tell yourself you can live with not knowing the truth ever. But the truth is, the not knowing becomes its own kind of life. You learn to function around it like a wound that never heals completely. Then one day it ends, and you have to remember how to live. Again, how to breathe without that weight on your chest constantly pressing." For the investigators, the case closed quietly, with final paperwork completed and filed. The official report summarized the timeline in 14 pages of detailed documentation. Disappearance, investigation, dormancy, rediscovery, confirmation, resolution at last after years of waiting. It was filed under resolved, subject found alive and returned to family. Caldwell, now retired in southern Utah, read the update in a newsletter, sent to former officers who had worked the case originally back then. He called the department that same day and said simply to whoever answered, "Tell the mother I'm glad. Tell her I never forgot Madison either." Months later, during a follow-up visit at the care center one afternoon, Patricia asked her daughter if she remembered Springville, their old home together. "Springville?" she prompted gently, not pushing too hard for answers or memories. Madison nodded once and drew a small circle in her notebook carefully. A rough outline of something familiar, a shape she recognized from memory. "Still there," she murmured quietly, the only full sentence she spoke that day. It was enough for Patricia, more than enough to hear her voice. Outside the window, spring sunlight lay over the snow, melting slowly into streams, running toward the valley below, carrying winter away with it gradually. For the first time in years, the word home meant something tangible. Again, even if fragile, even if it needed to be rebuilt carefully. If this story reminded you that no one should ever be forgotten, stay with us. Subscribe to the channel, share this video, and help us keep these stories alive. Every view, every comment, every share keeps another search going somewhere. For someone still missing, for another family still waiting for answers and closure. And before you go, tell us where you're watching from right now. Because our community spans the world, united by the belief that every missing person deserves to be found, to be brought home, to be remembered always. Thank you for being here with us, for caring about stories like Madison's. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep the light on.